It was just another scorching July afternoon in Riverbend, Texas, when Samantha Diaz vanished. To the outside world, she was just a hard-working mother, a face in the crowd. But to her husband, her daughter, and anyone who truly knew her, she was the pulse of the family. She was the rock, the one who always had it together. So, when she didn't come home that day, it was more than just unusual. It was unthinkable. Detective Owen Miller leaned against his desk, the hum of the air conditioner barely cutting through the oppressive heat. It was the kind of Texas heat that made the world outside shimmer like a mirage. He had just wrapped up a long day at the station, the kind that made him question if he'd ever feel the cool of an evening breeze again. He ran his fingers through his short-cropped hair, letting out a sigh as he glanced at the stack of unsolved cases in front of him. Most days, it was just the usual. Small-town mysteries, a missing pet here, a stolen car there. But something told him today would be different. His phone rang, snapping him out of his thoughts. It was dispatch. His gut tightened before he even picked it up. The dispatcher's voice was strained, sounding more like a plea than a report. "Owen, you there? We've got a situation. A woman, Samantha Diaz, she's gone missing." He felt his pulse quicken. It wasn't the first missing person case he'd worked on in Riverbend, but something about this one felt off. It was the middle of summer. Samantha was a 32-year-old mother of one, a woman who worked hard to provide for her family and kept a predictable routine. She was the type of person who was always early, always punctual, never one to just disappear. The kind of person people noticed when she wasn't around. Owen grabbed his keys and headed out the door, Smoke, his German Shepherd K9 partner, already waiting by the patrol car. The dog's brown eyes met his with a look that told him all he needed to know: something was wrong. As they pulled up to Samantha's house, Owen took in the familiar surroundings. It was a modest home in a quiet neighborhood, the kind of place you'd see in any small town: neat yards, white picket fences, kids playing on the sidewalk. But this time, the usual hum of daily life was replaced with a suffocating silence. Owen knocked on the door, but it swung open before he could make contact. A man in his late 30s, dressed in a worn-out t-shirt and jeans, stood there with a look of disbelief on his face. "I don't know where she is," he muttered, his voice shaky. "I was at work, and she was supposed to pick up our daughter from daycare. But she never showed up." This was Ricardo, Samantha's husband. He seemed to be trying to hold it together, but Owen could see the worry eating at him. 1,000 questions rushed to his mind. What could have happened in the short time Samantha was supposed to pick up their daughter, Isabella, and come home? Ricardo led Owen inside, where a small, dark-haired girl sat on the couch, clutching a stuffed bear. Her big brown eyes were wide, staring at the door as though she was waiting for her mother to walk through it. Owen's heart twisted as he watched her. "Has anyone heard from her? Any calls, any messages?" Owen asked as he tried to make sense of the growing panic. Ricardo shook his head. "She got a call at work, something urgent. Then she asked to leave early, said it was a family emergency. That's all I know. After that, nothing. No texts, no calls. It's like she vanished." Owen felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. It wasn't just that Samantha had disappeared, it was how she'd vanished. People don't just disappear without a trace. They don't leave family behind without a word. This wasn't just a missing persons case. This was something else. "All right, I'm going to need to talk to her coworkers, maybe check her phone records." "We'll find her," Owen said, trying to sound reassuring. But as he looked at Ricardo, he knew the truth: nothing was ever easy when it came to cases like this. As he walked out the door, Smoke's low growl interrupted his thoughts. The dog was tense, focused on something in the distance. Owen's eyes followed Smoke's line of sight, and his stomach dropped. There, standing at the edge of the yard, was an old, beat-up truck, its engine running, idling quietly, as if someone was waiting. But no one was in sight. Owen moved toward the truck cautiously, his hand brushing against the grip of his gun. Smoke, on alert, walked beside him, his eyes scanning the area. "Hey, you!" Owen shouted. No response. He was about to approach when a voice came from behind him. "You won't find her in that truck, detective." Owen turned around to see an unfamiliar man standing in the driveway, his hands in his pockets, a cold smirk on his face. The man's eyes flickered to the truck, then back to Owen. "Who the hell are you?" Owen demanded, his voice firm, but a sense of unease crept up his spine. The man didn't answer, just nodded toward the truck. "You'll find her, but it's going to cost you more than you're prepared for." Owen stood frozen, trying to process the cryptic message. The man turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows before Owen could ask another question. Smoke barked sharply, pulling Owen's attention back to the truck. Something about this whole situation felt off. And Owen had a sinking feeling that he was about to uncover something far more sinister than he had expected. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over Riverbend. Officer Owen Miller sat in his patrol car, staring at the silent streets. Smoke, his K-9 partner, sat in the passenger seat, his sharp eyes scanning the world around them. The stillness of the evening only made the mystery of Samantha Diaz's disappearance feel even more suffocating. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something big. The call had come just hours earlier, and with each passing minute, Owen's sense of urgency deepened. This wasn't just another case. Samantha was different. She wasn't the kind of person to just vanish. Her life was too tied to the people around her, her daughter, her husband, her job. And yet, she had disappeared without a trace. The eerie part was the strange phone call she had received before leaving work. What was it about that call that had caused her to leave so suddenly? Owen's first stop was the local diner, a place where Samantha had often grabbed coffee before heading to work. The warm lights of the diner flickered in the growing dusk. Inside, a few regulars sat at the counter, sipping their drinks and chatting about the day's events. Owen stepped inside, Smoke following closely behind. The scent of coffee and greasy diner food filled the air, but it did little to calm his nerves. Behind the counter, Sarah, the waitress, looked up from wiping down the counter. When she saw Owen, her face fell slightly. She recognized him, of course, everybody knew the town's detective. But it wasn't the usual friendly greeting. "Hey, Owen. You hear about Samantha?" she asked, her voice soft. Owen nodded, sliding into a booth and gesturing for Smoke to sit beside him. "I need to ask you about her. What do you know about the call she received before she left work?" Sarah hesitated for a moment before leaning in. "She didn't tell me exactly what it was about, but I could tell something was off. She seemed worried. You know how she's always on top of things, right?" This was the first time she seemed distracted. She paused, then added, but she kept looking at her phone, like she was waiting for something. Owen's mind raced as he took in the information. "What do you mean, waiting for something? Did she mention who called?" Sarah shook her head. "No, she didn't. But she did mention something strange, like she was expecting someone to show up. She even looked out the window a few times, like she was checking for somebody." Owen's stomach tightened. It didn't make sense. Samantha wasn't the kind of person to act paranoid or jumpy. She was steady, responsible, always focused on her family. So why had she seemed so nervous? He took a deep breath and looked down at Smoke, who was now lying quietly on the floor, his ears alert. "Do you know if anyone else was around when the call came in? Anyone who might have seen or heard something?" Sarah thought for a moment. "Well, there was Brad, the cook. He said he saw her talking on the phone outside for a few minutes. He didn't think much of it, but I don't know. It was the way she walked back inside, like something had spooked her." Owen's gut told him something wasn't right. "Thanks, Sarah. I'll talk to Brad." He stood up, leaving a few bills on the table, and motioned for Smoke to follow. As they walked out into the cool night air, Owen's mind turned over the details Sarah had shared. Something about Samantha's behavior didn't add up. Why had she been so distracted? And who had been calling her? Whoever it was had set something in motion, something that led to her vanishing without a trace. The next morning, Owen arrived at the local diner again, hoping to catch Brad before his shift started. Smoke trotted beside him, the dog's senses sharper than any human's. Inside, the diner was quiet, the only sounds coming from the clatter of dishes being washed in the back. Brad was behind the counter, flipping pancakes. "Hey, Brad. Got a minute?" Owen called out, stepping up to the counter. Brad looked up and gave a quick nod. "Sure, Owen. What's going on?" "I need to ask you about the day Samantha left work early," Owen said, leaning in slightly. "Sarah told me you saw her talking on the phone outside." Brad wiped his hands on his apron, then shrugged. "Yeah, she was out there for a bit, talking to someone. I didn't think much of it, but she seemed off. Like she was in a hurry. Not like her at all." "Did you hear anything she said? Anything that might give us a clue?" Owen pressed, his eyes narrowing. Brad hesitated before shaking his head. "No, nothing. Just, she was quiet, like she didn't want anyone to hear." Owen leaned forward. "Did she mention anyone by name? Or where she was going?" Brad's brow furrowed. "No, she didn't. But she did keep checking her phone. And when she walked back inside, she had this look, like she was about to leave town. I don't know. It was weird." Owen could feel the tension building in the pit of his stomach. The more he spoke to people who knew Samantha, the more he realized that something wasn't right. Whoever had called her, they weren't just another random stranger. They were connected to her life in ways Owen couldn't yet understand. "Thanks, Brad," Owen said, standing up. "If you remember anything else, don't hesitate to reach out." As he walked out the door, his thoughts were racing. He had more questions than answers, and the clock was ticking. Every second that passed without a lead was another second Samantha's life, or whatever remained of it, slipped further away from him. Smoke seemed to sense Owen's frustration. The dog's gaze was focused ahead, as though he knew that the next step in their investigation was just around the corner. Owen patted Smoke's head and got into his car. "Let's see if we can't get some answers, Smoke." The sun had barely risen, but Officer Owen Miller was already on the move. With Smoke by his side, the two of them made their way to a diner on the edge of town where a local vendor had reported something odd the night before. Owen knew Riverbend like the back of his hand. It was small, quiet, and for the most part, safe, so safe, in fact, that it made him uneasy when things like this didn't add up. Missing persons cases didn't belong in this kind of place. Yet, here he was, about to piece together another lead in a case that had him questioning everything. The diner was a rundown joint, tucked between two boarded-up stores, its neon sign flickering in the early morning light. Owen pushed the door open, the bell above it chiming in protest. The smell of stale coffee and burnt toast hit him as he stepped inside, his boots tapping softly against the old wooden floor. It was a quiet morning, with only a few patrons nursing their cups and newspapers. Smoke, as always, was alert, his sharp eyes scanning the room while Owen approached the counter. "Detective Owen Miller," he said to the waitress, who had already seen the K9 by his side. She gave him a nod. "You here for the usual case? Or something different this time?" she asked, pouring a fresh cup of coffee. Owen smiled, the warmth of the room briefly pushing away the cold unease in his gut. "Something different. I'm looking into the disappearance of Samantha Diaz. You seen anything strange around here lately? Anyone talking about her?" The waitress, who had been working at the diner for as long as anyone could remember, paused for a moment. Then, she lowered her voice as if the walls might have ears. "She was here a few days ago, right before she went missing. Not with anyone, just by herself. She looked nervous, like she was expecting someone." Owen leaned in slightly, narrowing his eyes. "Did she say anything? Or mention anyone?" "Not directly," she replied, glancing around the diner nervously. "But I heard her mention a name. A man. She called him Carlos. Said something about him needing to meet her. I didn't hear everything, but it was enough to raise my eyebrows." Carlos. The name echoed in Owen's mind, a knot forming in his stomach. The waitress had no other details, but her words added another layer to the mystery. Samantha had been waiting for someone, and it sounded like she knew exactly who they were. As Owen walked out of the diner, he turned to Smoke. "Let's go see if we can track down this Carlos." The streets of Riverbend were quiet, too quiet. As Owen and Smoke made their way through the neighborhoods, he couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was at play here, something that went beyond just Samantha's disappearance. The quiet hum of the town seemed to mask something darker, something hidden just beneath the surface. Owen drove slowly, eyes scanning for anything that could give him a hint about Carlos's whereabouts. He stopped at a few spots: the gas station where Samantha's phone last pinged, the local market where she'd shopped the week before. But nothing stood out. Not yet. Just as he was about to leave the last place, Smoke's sharp bark cut through the silence, pulling Owen's attention to the side of the road. The dog was standing stiff, his nose sniffing the air. "What is it, Smoke?" Owen asked, stepping out of the car. The dog walked straight ahead, leading Owen to a small alleyway just behind the market. The alley was narrow, and the faint smell of old food and garbage filled the air. But something else lingered, a scent Owen couldn't place. He crouched down, his hand reaching for the ground, and saw something small and shiny. It was a bracelet, silver and delicate, half buried in the dirt. His stomach sank as he examined it more closely. He recognized it instantly: it was Samantha's. She'd been wearing it the last time he saw her. Smoke's low growl pulled Owen from his thoughts. The dog was on high alert, his nose pressed against a weathered door at the end of the alley. Owen walked over to the door, which appeared to lead into an abandoned building. It was locked, but the faintest scratch marks near the edges made Owen's pulse race. Someone had been in and out of this place recently. Without hesitation, Owen pulled out his phone and called for backup. He wasn't about to risk anything in this building alone, not with how things were shaping up. The backup arrived quickly, 2 officers from the local unit, and together, they broke down the door. The air inside the building was thick with dust, but the faintest scent of cologne lingered. It was a smell that reminded Owen of something familiar, something he couldn't quite place. His instincts were screaming. As they moved deeper into the building, Owen's flashlight landed on a stack of papers scattered on the floor. Among them, a letter caught his attention. He bent down to pick it up, unfolding the crumpled paper. The letter was addressed to Samantha. It was from a company named Acosta Enterprises, the same company Carlos had worked for, Owen realized as his mind connected the dots. The letter detailed an offer, a job, one that Samantha had never mentioned before. As Owen read the rest of the letter, he found it strange. The words were formal, but there was a tone beneath them, an almost desperate plea hidden in the lines. He quickly realized that Samantha had been part of something much larger than anyone realized. Something dangerous. The moon hung low over Riverbend, casting an eerie glow over the small town. The streets were quiet, save for the distant hum of the freeway and the occasional bark from a neighbor's dog. The usual buzz of life had been replaced with a palpable tension, a sense that something had shifted, something had gone terribly wrong. Detective Owen Miller couldn't shake the feeling that they were getting closer. He and Smoke had spent the past few days chasing leads, following whispers from people who had seen something odd, heard something strange, or just felt the weight of the mystery that had swallowed Samantha Diaz whole. But the deeper they dug, the more things didn't add up. It was late into the night when Owen finally stood outside the entrance to the old Riverbend textile factory. Once a thriving part of the town's economy, the factory had long since fallen into disrepair. The rusting gate and boarded-up windows now served as a grim reminder of a bygone era. Owen had been here before, back when he was still a rookie, dealing with petty thefts and minor incidents. But tonight, it felt different, like this abandoned place held secrets that had been buried for years. Smoke sat quietly beside him, his ears perked, eyes scanning the darkness. The dog had been more than just a partner over the years, he was a true companion, one who could sense things before Owen could. Tonight, however, Smoke was more than just alert, he was restless. It was as if he was feeling the same unease that gnawed at Owen's insides. "Let's see what we can find, boy," Owen muttered under his breath. They pushed open the rusted gate with a creak, the sound slicing through the silence like a knife. The factory loomed before them, an ominous silhouette against the dark sky. Inside, it was worse than Owen had imagined. The air was thick with dust and the smell of decay. Broken machinery lay scattered across the floor like forgotten skeletons, remnants of the factory's once bustling past. As they made their way deeper into the cavernous space, Owen's flashlight caught something on the far wall, faint, smudged marks that looked like they had been recently disturbed. The footprints led to a back room, hidden away from the main floor. Owen motioned for Smoke to stay close, and the dog's low growl reverberated through the air. The door to the back room creaked open, and what they found inside stopped Owen dead in his tracks. Stacks of old crates and boxes filled the room, most of them unopened and gathering dust. But it wasn't the boxes that caught Owen's attention, it was the strange markings on the floor. Smoke sniffed the ground, his tail stiff. Owen knelt beside the markings, wiping away some of the grime. There, hidden beneath the layers of dirt, were symbols, sophisticated, precise, and unmistakably connected to the strange pattern of events surrounding Samantha's disappearance. Suddenly, Smoke lunged forward, his paws landing on something metal. Owen's heart skipped a beat as he approached, shining his flashlight on the object. It was a heavy metal door, partially hidden beneath a pile of discarded materials. Without thinking, Owen grabbed the edge and pulled it open. A narrow staircase spiraled downward into a pitch-black abyss. "What in the hell?" Owen whispered to himself. Without hesitation, he motioned for Smoke to follow, his instincts telling him they had stumbled upon something far deeper than just a missing person case. They descended into the darkness, each step creaking under their weight. The cold, damp air enveloped them as they reached the bottom, where the faintest traces of light began to filter through cracks in the walls. The room they entered was unlike anything Owen had ever seen. It was a hidden space, a bunker of sorts, deep below the factory. Tables were cluttered with old, dusty papers, and walls were lined with photographs, some of which Owen recognized, missing women, including Samantha Diaz. His blood ran cold as he scanned the photos, noticing something chilling. Each picture had been meticulously marked with dates, times, and locations, many of which matched the timeline of Samantha's disappearance. But what stood out the most were the names. Each woman's name was paired with a symbol, similar to the one Owen had found upstairs. Smoke let out a low whine, as if sensing the weight of what they had uncovered. Owen stepped forward, his flashlight revealing more documents scattered across a table. They were records, detailed files on each woman, including personal information, schedules, and photographs of the women taken from a distance, just like the ones in the factory. The realization hit Owen like a ton of bricks: the disappearances weren't random. They were part of something planned, methodical, and disturbingly calculated. His heart pounded in his chest as he flipped through the documents, each page revealing more about the operation that had been running right under his nose. These weren't just abductions. These were meticulously orchestrated disappearances, part of an underground network that had been using Riverbend as its headquarters. But who was behind it all? A sudden sound interrupted his thoughts, faint footsteps, growing closer. Owen's grip tightened on his flashlight, his pulse quickening. Smoke stood at attention, his eyes locked on the entrance to the bunker. "Stay close, Smoke," Owen whispered, already knowing the answer to the question he was about to ask. They weren't alone. The footsteps grew louder, and Owen's eyes darted toward the shadow that had appeared at the door. The silhouette of a man emerged from the darkness, his face hidden in shadow. "I knew you'd come here," the man said, his voice smooth, almost too calm. "I've been expecting you." Owen's mind raced. Everything they'd uncovered, this hidden room, the records, the women, it was all connected. But to what end? And why hadn't anyone else in town noticed? The man stepped forward into the light, revealing a cold smile that made Owen's skin crawl. "We've only just begun," the man said, his eyes glinting in the darkness. Owen reached for his radio, but the man was too quick. He lunged, knocking the radio from Owen's hand. Smoke immediately sprang into action, snarling as he charged at the man. Owen barely had time to react before the man's hand shot out, grabbing him by the arm and yanking him toward the table of files. "You don't understand, detective," the man said, his voice now menacing. "This isn't just about Samantha. It's about something bigger." As the man spoke, Owen realized with a sinking heart that the story he had thought was just a missing person case was only the tip of the iceberg. The dark, twisted truth beneath Riverbend was far more dangerous, and far more complicated, than he could have ever imagined. The sun had already dipped below the horizon when Officer Owen Miller and Smoke finally reached the address of Caleb Brooks. The air was thick with tension, and Owen couldn't shake the feeling that this was it, the moment everything would come together. It was just a matter of finding the right pieces. The road leading to Brooks' house was lined with old trees, their branches reaching like long, gnarled fingers above the narrow street. The house itself stood at the end of a long driveway, a quiet, almost foreboding structure. From the outside, it looked like the kind of place you'd pass by without a second thought, well kept, but not particularly memorable. But Owen knew better now. He knew that nothing in Riverbend was as it seemed. Not anymore. Smoke's nostrils flared as they got closer. The dog had been unusually quiet, but there was something in the air, something that made Owen's skin crawl. He reached down and scratched the dog's ears. "Easy, Smoke. We're close." The K9's keen sense of smell had been their best tool in cracking this case wide open. It had led them to hidden stashes of evidence, connected dots Owen never would have thought of. But tonight, it felt different. There was a coldness that permeated the air, a feeling of dread hanging like a heavy cloud. They parked at the end of the driveway and stepped out of the car. Owen glanced over at Smoke, whose ears were perked, every muscle in his body tense. The house in front of them was dark, but the faint glow of a light seeping through the curtains suggested someone was inside. Owen didn't waste any time. He motioned for Smoke to follow him as they approached the front door. Before they could knock, the door swung open. Standing in the doorway was Caleb Brooks, the man who had been at the center of the investigation for weeks. Owen knew him by reputation, wealthy, powerful, connected. He was the kind of man who could get away with almost anything, especially in a town like Riverbend. But Owen wasn't about to let that happen again. "Detective Miller," Caleb said, his voice smooth and calculated. "I didn't expect to see you here tonight. Come for a chat?" There was no hint of fear in Caleb's demeanor. In fact, he looked more like a man offering a friendly handshake than one who had been caught up in the darkest secrets Riverbend had to offer. "I need to ask you a few questions, Caleb," Owen said, his tone even, but firm. "About Samantha Diaz. You're the last person who saw her alive." Caleb didn't flinch. "I see. And what makes you think I know anything about that?" Owen took a step forward, his hand resting casually on Smoke's harness. "I'm not here to play games, Caleb. You know why I'm here. And I know you're hiding something. So let's get straight to the point." The silence between them stretched for a moment before Caleb stepped aside, letting Owen and Smoke into the house. The living room was well lit, but it felt cold, empty. There was no warmth in the space, nothing that suggested it had ever been a home. Owen's eyes darted around the room, taking in the decor, expensive, but lacking any personal touches. "You've got a lot of nerve showing up here, detective," Caleb said, as he motioned for Owen to sit down. "But I'm listening. What exactly do you think I've done?" Owen lowered himself into the chair, Smoke sitting beside him. His eyes locked onto Caleb's with the intensity of someone who had been chasing a lead for too long to let it slip through his fingers now. "Tell me about the calls Samantha received before she disappeared," Owen said, leaning forward. "Tell me what you know about her." Caleb's smile didn't waver. He took a long sip from his drink, eyes glinting with a kind of amusement. "I don't know anything about her calls, detective. But I can guess what you're thinking. You think I had something to do with her disappearance. Maybe even something worse. Well, I'm afraid you're barking up the wrong tree." Owen didn't respond immediately. Instead, he turned his attention to Smoke, who was sitting still, staring at Caleb, his body low and alert. Smoke had always been good at reading people, at sensing when something wasn't quite right. Owen trusted his dog more than anyone else. "I know you've been in touch with her, Caleb," Owen said. "I know she was worried. You've been playing both sides, haven't you?" Caleb's face changed for the briefest of moments, a flicker of something, guilt, maybe, before his mask returned. But it was enough. Owen could see it now. The crack in the facade. "I don't know what you think you've got on me," Caleb said, trying to regain control of the conversation. "But whatever it is, you won't find it here." Owen stood up suddenly, his chair scraping against the floor. He motioned to Smoke. "Search the house, Smoke." The K9's body tensed as he moved toward the hallway, sniffing the air, his sharp nose guiding him through the house. Owen followed closely behind, his eyes scanning every corner, every surface. As they entered the kitchen, Smoke stopped suddenly in front of a cupboard. Owen's eyes narrowed. The dog had found something. "Caleb, what's in there?" Caleb's eyes flicked to the cupboard, and for the first time, a look of concern crossed his face. But it was too late. Owen was already opening the door, revealing a stack of files. Not just any files, these were personal, confidential. They had names, addresses, and photos. Owen recognized several of them immediately. Women who had gone missing in Riverbend, their faces hauntingly familiar. "These are the women from the cases I've been working," Owen said, his voice tight with disbelief. "And Samantha's file is here too." Caleb stood frozen, his face draining of color. Owen knew he had him now. "Looks like I was right," Owen said, his voice low. "You've been running this operation all along, haven't you?" Caleb opened his mouth, but the words didn't come. Instead, he just stared at the files, his eyes wide with panic. "This is it, Caleb," Owen said. "Your secrets are out. And I'm going to make sure you pay for what you've done." As the final pieces of the puzzle clicked into place, Owen realized that the worst of the mystery was far from over. Caleb Brooks wasn't just involved in Samantha's disappearance. He was the mastermind behind something much larger. And it wasn't just Samantha Diaz he had taken. The search for the truth was far from over. But with Smoke by his side, Owen was determined to follow this case to its bitter end. It had been days since the cryptic warning from the mysterious man outside Samantha Diaz's house, and Owen's mind was still racing. What had he meant by, "It's going to cost you more than you're prepared for"? Those words gnawed at Owen, echoing in his mind like a constant reminder that the deeper he dug into this case, the more dangerous things would get. But Owen was used to danger, used to the kind of work that made your heart pound and your stomach twist with unease. Still, this case felt different. There was a darkness to it, something lurking just beneath the surface. Owen and Smoke had already visited several locations, tracking down every lead they could, but nothing seemed to add up. Every new clue was like a puzzle piece that just didn't fit. Samantha's phone records showed no unusual activity, her work colleagues hadn't seen anything out of the ordinary, and yet the more they searched, the more questions there were. Why had she suddenly disappeared without a word? What could have caused her to leave her daughter behind, just when she was supposed to be picking her up? It wasn't until Owen revisited the abandoned factory, the site that had haunted him from the beginning, that something clicked. Smoke was the first to react, growling softly and pulling at the leash, eager to lead Owen deeper into the dark recesses of the old building. As Owen followed the dog through the crumbling hallways, the smell of dust and rust filling the air, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were getting closer to the truth. But closer to what? The eerie silence of the factory seemed to swallow every sound, making it impossible to shake the dread creeping up his spine. Then, Smoke stopped dead in his tracks. His ears perked up, his nose twitching as he sniffed the air. Owen crouched down, scanning the area. They had been through here before, but this time, it was different. This time, something stood out. Smoke padded forward, and Owen followed closely behind. They reached a small, hidden room in the back of the factory, one that hadn't been explored in the initial search. As Owen pushed open the creaky door, the dim light from his flashlight flickered across a set of old files piled in the corner. At first glance, the files didn't seem significant, just a collection of dusty, forgotten papers. But as Owen scanned the labels, his heart skipped a beat. One file stood out, the name, Samantha Diaz, written in bold letters on the cover. Owen's hand shook as he reached for it, the weight of the moment settling in. He pulled the file open and began to read, his eyes widening as he uncovered the truth. The file wasn't just about Samantha, it was about a network of women. A series of missing women, each with a trail that led back to Riverbend. Samantha's disappearance wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of something bigger. Much bigger. The file detailed the lives of several other women who had disappeared over the past few years, all connected by a disturbing pattern, strange phone calls, all leading them to meet someone in the same location, the same abandoned factory, at different times. It was clear now, this wasn't just a random disappearance. Samantha had been targeted, just like the others. Owen's mind raced as he processed the information. But just as he was about to dive deeper into the files, a noise broke the silence. A floorboard creaked above them, followed by a faint shuffle. Smoke barked, his fur standing on end, and Owen's hand instinctively went to his gun. He wasn't alone. The figure that emerged from the shadows was the last person Owen expected to see. Caleb Brooks. The same man who had been so elusive during the investigation, the man who seemed to be connected to everything without ever really being involved. But now, here he was, standing before Owen, his face grim and unreadable. Owen's heart pounded in his chest. "Didn't expect you to find it," Caleb said, his voice calm, almost too calm. "You're getting closer than you should." Owen's grip tightened on his gun. "What the hell is going on here, Caleb? What do you know about Samantha?" Caleb smirked, stepping forward with a slow, deliberate pace. "I know enough to know you're digging in places you shouldn't be. Samantha wasn't the first, and she won't be the last. But now that you've found what's in that file, I guess there's no turning back." Owen's mind was racing. Everything was starting to make sense. Samantha had been part of a much larger operation, an operation that Caleb had been orchestrating from the shadows. But Owen still didn't understand the full scope of it. What was Caleb's role in all of this? And why was he so calm about it? Before Owen could respond, Caleb reached into his jacket, pulling out something small and metallic. It was a key. A key to the very same truck Owen had seen parked outside Samantha's house days earlier. "You'll find your answers there," Caleb said coldly. "But you might not like them." With that, he turned and disappeared into the shadows, leaving Owen standing alone in the room, the weight of the mystery pressing down on him. His hand was still clenched around the gun, his thoughts racing. He had been given a key to unravel everything: Samantha's disappearance, the network of missing women, Caleb's involvement, but the question remained: what was really waiting for him at the end of this trail? Thank you so much for sticking with us through this mystery. What do you think will happen next? Do you believe Caleb is the mastermind behind everything, or is there someone else pulling the strings? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next part of this gripping story.